Thanks very much, and good morning to you, and good morning to all of our listeners. Thanks for tuning in. We're coming to you on DSTV Audio Bouquet at channel 802, on OpenView on 6 to 8, on SABC Plus, as well as www.channelafrica.co.za. With you until 9 this morning. And in this first hour, we look at the UN warning that Sudan faces a heightened risk of a new genocide, and young people in Kenya lead a national shutdown today. We did say that that's a story we're going to keep giving updates on as it keeps developing, so we'll be touching on that. All those stories and more, of course, after the news with Jwalane Tulongwepe, and then sports headlines with Fikile Lingwati.
SABC News, the African perspective.
Here we go. Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. A UN-mandated commission investigating suspected human rights violations and war crimes in the Democratic Republic of Congo cannot proceed due to a funding crisis in the UN Human Rights Office. The OHCHR is facing a major cash crunch caused by some countries failing to pay their full contributions. This has also been compounded by major cuts in foreign aid by the United States under President Donald Trump. In February, a special session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva agreed to set up a fact-finding mission and a formal commission of inquiry to investigate rights violations, including massacres and sexual violence in North and South Kivu in the east of the DRC. The former Prime Minister of Sudan, Abdallah Hamdok, has called on South Africa to assist Sudanese to engage in a dialogue with the aim of ending the war in that country. Hamdok says not much is done to return Sudan to democracy. He believes that South Africa's involvement will prove to be beneficial.
And we would like South Africa to get involved more actively in our case. His Excellency, the President Cyril Ramaphosa. And he assured us that South Africa will definitely be involved in the Sudanese conflict, help us address this. There is a lot of history between our countries. South Africa has an excellent, unique experience that can be extremely useful to us.
Hamdok says the conflict in his country has led to an unprecedented humanitarian crisis, which has claimed the lives of more than 100,000 people. He has also thanked those who had helped the country so far.
Our expectations from our brothers and sisters at all levels, leadership and the public in the continent, to help us address this crisis. But also I must so commend many countries in the continent and even beyond generously received our people as refugees in many places.
Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwachube says South African schools have become places of violence and fear. She says schools should provide safe environments for learners. Gwachube was speaking during a joint signing ceremony of the Safe Schools Protocol with the Ministry of Police in Cape Town in the Western Cape Province. The initiative aims to ensure safety at schools, especially those in crime hotspots. Gwachube says violent crime like murder and rape remain a challenge in schools.
During the 2023-2024 financial year, there were 28 murders within our basic education institutions. Shockingly, near half occurred in KwaZulu-Natal, and 46% of these murders, those involved learner-on-learner violence. 2/3 of rapes in our schools also involved learner-on-learner violence, and more than 11,000 burglaries took place during that financial year, and some ranging from the theft of critical teaching material to even things like basic food items from our school nutrition program.
Political analyst Ronald Henwood says the Iranian government's attack on an American military base in Qatar was an attempt to save face among citizens of the country. The United States at the weekend launched airstrikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. Tehran responded by firing missiles at the U.S. Al Udeid base in Qatar, which is America's largest military base in the Middle East. There have been no reports of casualties or injuries. Henwood says Iran warned the U.S. of its intentions well in advance.
it's an off-ramp for Iran to save face in the context of what has happened for the domestic audience mostly. And I say this because what we know is that the Iranians informed America that they are going to launch the missiles to the base before the time, so they had ample time to make sure that there would be no casualties. It did not hit anything significantly. The US, by the way, moved the aircraft that were not in hardened shelters away from there probably about 10 days ago because they were planning and they knew this was a risk.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Springbok coach Rassie Erasmus has named 4 uncapped players to face the Barbarians in Cape Town. And Zimbabwe national cricket head coach says they are looking forward to testing themselves against the world test champions. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
So it's a little bit after 6 o'clock, and every day at this time we bring you on the program something we call the Africa Roundup. And this is an opportunity for us to get you up to date with the latest news from across the continent that's happened in the last 24 hours, actually, just to keep you up to date in a concise fashion. And we use our team of reporters, experts and analysts to put all of those stories into context. And we begin in Sudan, where the United Nations has issued a stark warning of a possible new genocide as violence surges in Darfur and Kordofan. The Rapid Support Forces and allied militias stand accused of targeting non-Arab communities. Naba Muhaddin reports from Port Sudan.
RSF are accused of committing genocides and ethnically driven killings in Sudan, especially in the Darfur region and in Kordofan recently, where 2 main cities were captured by the RSF recently, and 4 out of 5 states in Darfur are controlled by the Rapid Support Forces. The situation on the ground is warning of a wider scale and a bigger scale civil war, as right now fighting is intensified in Al-Fashir, and there is also reports of ethnically driven killings in displacement camps, especially in Zamzam and Abu Shuak, being carried out by the Rapid Support Forces. The United Nations and the Security Council, many times they called on the 2 warring parties to sit on negotiation table, but there is no resolution in sight, and the RSF many times they rejected any calls to de-escalate and to stop targeting civilians on ethnic basis.
The United Nations has warned that, or the head rather of the United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, has warned of a worsening crisis for hundreds of thousands of children who have fled Sudan's war into eastern Chad. With over 700,000 children escaping into neighboring countries, they account for over 60% of all refugee arrivals. The BBC's Camilla Mills has this report.
On a visit to the region, Catherine Russell described harrowing accounts from those who have fled killings, mass rapes, and homes being burned. She said the most vulnerable children were bearing the brunt of both the war in Sudan and a lack of essential services for those who have escaped. Many of them are malnourished, out of school, and at serious risk of exploitation and disease. Ms. Russell said Chad is already stretched beyond capacity.
In Kenya, tensions are rising ahead of the planned anti-government protests in Nairobi today. But now a new group has entered the scene, young men wielding clubs, claiming they are there to protect businesses and maintain order.
When protests are expected in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, Swale Aroko grabs a wooden club and heads downtown. He is what some would label a goon. Reuters reporters have repeatedly seen the so-called goons advancing alongside police officers towards groups of unarmed demonstrators. But Aroko says he and others like him are, quote, patriots, defending property in a central business district against protesters who loot and cause violence.
You protest but don't buy.
But Aroko insists they aren't working with the police and are financed by local business people to protect property instead. He said he was paid 5,000 Kenyan shillings, or close to $39 per protest.
Global challenges are expected to take centre stage at this year's G20 meeting. That's according to South Africa's Auditor General, Tsakani Maluleke, who currently chairs the Supreme Audit Institutions. She was speaking at the G20 Supreme Audit Institutions Summit in Johannesburg.
We've managed to highlight how the unique mandate, the capabilities, and the vantage point that we have as Supreme Audit Institutions position us to support our nations in addressing the key stumbling blocks to progress. These themes of infrastructure and skills development, along with the challenges and indeed opportunities that relate to them, have featured consistently and prominently on the agenda of the G20 since it began.
And finally, scientists may have found some groundbreaking way to combat plastic pollution by turning waste into medicine. Yeah, researchers say that specially engineered bacteria could convert plastic into painkillers like paracetamol. The BBC's Olivia Noon picks up the story for us.
Researchers from the University of Edinburgh used a molecule from plastic bottles to spark a chemical reaction in the E. coli strain of bacteria. From this modified bacteria, scientists were able to transform it into paracetamol. The lead author, Stephen Wallace, said the research demonstrated a greener way to manufacture the medicine using bacterial fermentation instead of fossil fuels. However, others have warned there's a long way to go before this method could be scaled to industrial levels. Some experts say it would be more worthwhile to reduce plastic pollution at source.
And that's how we come to the end of the Africa Roundup for today. We'll have more for you tomorrow after the 6 o'clock news. Stay with us, though. Coming up shortly, we're going to zoom into West Africa as Asanda speaks to the ever-passionate Dr. David Matsanga. That's coming up.
The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Interracial relationships. And now you are based in the States and you are married to a beautiful white woman, white lady.
I learned that, for us in our culture, we literally can speak our mind. I remember when we started dating and whatnot, and, she picked up like a little bit of weight. And me, I was like, oh, wow, you must be happy in this relationship because look at you. You look great. You're even picking up some weight. And she got really, really offended. And it took I think it was about a couple of hours before I could realize that, because I could tell that she was off after that. And it took me a while to figure out what it was. Until later when I was talking to her, I'm like, you're really, really off today. And then she expressed that, yeah, because you're telling me that I'm picking on some weight. And I'm like, in my culture, when you are gaining some weight, it means you're happy. Yes. So that's what I was trying to imply.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
14 minutes past 6 Central African Time. South Africa's black economic empowerment policies through the lens of 3 prominent Afrikaners came into sharp focus during a discussion hosted by a conservative think tank in the United States in Washington, D.C. this week. The Hudson Institute hosted the leader of the Freedom Front Plus, Dr. Corne Mulder, CEO of Southern African Agri-Initiative, Dr. Theo de Jager, and CEO of the National Employers Association, Gerard Papenvis, for a discussion titled An Afrikaner's Perspective on U.S.-South Africa Relations. The discussion delved into BEE, farm murders, and Pretoria's geopolitical choices, among other topics. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports that the issue of alleged genocide in South Africa didn't come up at all.
The invited guests indicated at the start that they were in Washington because they were serious about South Africa and its future, as the discussion quickly veered into the question of land and reform around ownership. CEO of the Southern African Agri-Initiative, Dr. Theo de Jager.
Land reform is all about getting more equal
occupation. Actually, land reform should be about creating a class of profitable black farmers. But it's not happened over the last 30 years. And a lot of the tension about land can be boiled down to that. You see, in land reform, it is very seldom that title deed is given to the beneficiaries. So these farmers who are beneficiaries of land reform, they are delivered to the state. They are tenants of the state. And they cannot give their land as collateral to access financing for production. Hence, they wait for the state to give them money for the inputs, their fertilizer, their seeds, their mechanization. And if government does not give it to them, they cannot pay their electricity, they cannot pay their wages, and they are struggling.
De Jager also sought to challenge the narrative that farm murders were not of particular significance within the broader crime context in South Africa.
In other murders, like violence on women and children, like the gangsters on the Cape Flats, no one calls for those murders. Like there's the singing, kill a farmer, kill a boer. And when it happens, it's not with the same brutality. You do not have the same torturing all night long before somebody is actually killed.
Further arguing that BEE, while formulated to address the huge disparities left by apartheid, was in fact harming the economy through the systematic persecution of a particular type of person, the white male. Listen to Gerard Papenfuss of the National Employers Association of South Africa.
That type of person in South Africa has no employment rights. They cannot be employed above a certain level. There's a ceiling for them, but they don't have to be employed. So they are put at a serious disadvantage. If that white male, is living wherever, is forced to leave wherever he's working, and he starts a business, he'll run into the second phase of the problem. If his business grows, he will have to black empower that business. In other words, if you want to do business with the state, or perhaps with a big business that wants to comply with BEE, you'll have to give away 51% of your business. So you can't find a job and you can't own your own business. That's a very simplified approach towards this whole scheme. And that is the reason of the decline in South Africa, is this policy, which they call black economic empowerment and employment equity. That is the reason for the economic decline of South Africa.
South Africa's land policy is primarily driven by the need to address historical injustices of land dispossession and the 1913 Natives Land Act that severely limited black ownership, a redress that has been uneven since the dawn of democracy. Pushing back against BEE criticism, President Cyril Ramaphosa told Parliament in May that it was racist policies of old that prevented all South Africans from playing a meaningful role in the economy, and that a democratic South Africa was broadening black economic participation. This was the country's top diplomat, Ronald Lamola, in Washington this May.
There is no law in South Africa that is specifically persecuting or targeting white Afrikaners, but there is a constitutional imperative that is there for transformation in the country, which is in the interest of the whole nation, for nation building. That is a constitutional imperative that is in the preamble, that is in the various laws of our country, which we have to ensure that we continue to persuade, to pursue, and to make sure that that imperative becomes a reality.
The leader of the Freedom Front Plus thanked the Trump administration for reaching out to the Afrikaner community despite the questionable reasoning around granting some refugee status, but said he would love to see Afrikaners remain in South Africa and make a success of the country.
We are part of the government of national unity, but there are two huge problems. One, as I've mentioned with regard to the economic policy, what chance is there to create job creation, to get economic growth, if the point of departure remains these outdated policies, with no certainty with regard to private property ownership? Not only land, all private property can be expropriated without compensation. That's law in South Africa now. It can be implemented. The second problem we have is international relations remain the exclusive domain of the ANC. That's why South Africa has positioned ourselves vis-à-vis Israel, vis-à-vis Iran, and you can mention all of those things. That remains a huge challenge. So we would like to see how do we go forward, that kind of deal that we would like to put on the table. The first will deal with economics. The second one, we should look at the geopolitical position of South Africa.
The presidency has long clarified that the expropriation law was not a confiscation instrument but a constitutionally mandated legal process subject to the courts and due process that ensured public access to land in an equitable and just manner guided by the Constitution, while the presidency was ultimately responsible for the country's foreign policy and international relations. I'm Shervin Bryce-Pease in New York.
20 minutes past 6. Let's take a look at some of the stories making headlines in West Africa as we're joined on the line by political scientist and conflict resolution expert, Dr. David Matsanga. How are you on this particular Wednesday? It's the 25th of June, Dr. Matsanga.
Thank you very much. I am all right. I'm sorry. I have been around. I don't know who is messing up my telephones, but I hope it is not anybody in the Middle East doing what they usually do best. Thank you.
Definitely. We hope there are no missiles fired in your phone. So we appreciate you making time as always. Let's start with the U.S., by the way, as we talk of the Middle East. They're dismissing travel ban claims as a visa review is sparking concerns in Nigeria. The visa review affects 36 countries, but the U.S. says it is not a blanket ban against Africa or Nigeria. What do you make of that?
It is the usual language of Trump. He makes statements, sweeping statements without verification. He doesn't use his offices. Trump has got a very good, chief of staff, Susie Wells, a very well-educated lady with whom we have worked with for a long time, myself personally. I don't know why he does not take the advice of Susie Wells to make sure that he checks all the facts before he makes sweeping statements like the giving a blanket, visa blockage on Africans. This is not very good. You can see the mess he's making right now. It is not, they are just coming up to say, oh, we are sorry, it wasn't made for this. But indeed, when you arrive JFK, if you're a black guy from Africa, you are questioned, you are pulled aside. Even when you have a British passport, it's sorry. It's a very sorry state that America is going through at the moment.
When do we expect the review to be done? The initial deadline of 18 June was given when the travel restrictions would apply.
For me, as an African, some of the countries like in Nigeria, Cameroon, the people who have fled to the U.S. are really are fleeing persecution, serious persecution that is taking place in those two countries. And the people in Europe, France, has supported these regimes. USA supports these regimes. The two, Nigeria, why don't you put Nigeria government on sanction, not the human beings, not the refugees fleeing this persecution in Christians being persecuted in Nigeria? Why do you block the guys who are running away from persecution, the army killing you instead of protecting you? In southern Cameroon, Paul Biya has wiped out everybody. These are some of the countries we should target, but not every African who should be targeted. I think Trump policies are misdirected to the wrong people and to the wrong countries instead of dealing with countries that are actually abusing human rights. Those two in Africa are doing the worst for us, giving us a very bad name, and the governments must be brought to accountability.
Let's move to Niger now, Doctor, where the military leaders, they want to nationalize a uranium firm. So this majority French-owned local uranium company, Somme, has been part of a row between the two countries. Why are they wanting to nationalize it?
I think the Niger government has made it abundantly clear that uranium has been sold for $200 a kilo, and then they are given peanuts, like 10%. The French take it, sell it, bank the money, and they don't return the money to Niger. Time has come for Africa to reclaim its minerals, resources. It is ours, given by God. Why didn't God put uranium in France? Why should France come here to direct us on how to use our uranium? Come on, Africa, stand up. Niger is doing a great job. Actually, nationalize it. Let France go back and buy this uranium on the market value. You see, Burkina Faso sold its uranium. It is building roads, buying mobile hospitals.
Yes, and as we mentioned that, Dr. Katsanga, Niger's move to want to keep more local control of the country's mineral wealth follows in the footsteps of Burkina Faso. How much on this particular move do you think is as a result of Ibrahim Traore's influence?
It is growing, my dear sister. It is better you fly there one day with us and you see how this young man, Traore, how this Ibrahim Traore, the angel of Africa, the man who has shown that we can do it. He's a military guy. He's not with PhD, no professor, but he has done it. You can see ambulances, motorable ambulances moving to the villages to treat people. This is something that he has not bought big gas, Pratos, like some African countries. This young man has done it, and the influence is growing. Chad is joining. Several countries, Togo, you see, we did the program here. People, even in this Nigeria, the younger men, they are watching Mr. Tinubu. How Tinubu is expensively going in bed with France. Yet France is one of the biggest problems of Africa. And I have not hesitated to say it, let me be killed on the way. France has frustrated Africa. 3/4 of Africa, my sister is frustrated by France. Look at the wars. Everywhere in Africa, France is involved.
And another similar move to Burkina Faso from Niger's side is that they're distancing themselves from France and moving towards Russia. Then on the other hand, Mali's junta chief is visiting the Russian leader, the visit kicking off on Monday there between General Assimi Goita and Vladimir Putin. Russia seems to be where the alliance of the Sahel states is moving closer to. Do you think this is due to its support of West Africa in battling jihadists, or there's more to this closeness?
Yes, both. Russia has been a darling of Africa. Russia has been giving us support. South Africa was liberated. You are younger people. Some of us who took part in a very serious struggle against apartheid, we got support, education, military training from Russia. So Russia has been supporting, standing by the liberation, total emancipation of Africa. And that's it. You can call it they are coming for this, for that, but no. Russia, China, they have been on the other side to say the oppressed, the voiceless, while these French always come for money, take our money. Even you do a budget for us Africans after 67 years of independence, some Frenchman comes to do a budget for an African, give you what is yours when you have taken my uranium. Very, very good. Go on, Gota. Go on, Mali. Go on.
Let's just touch on this,
Dr.
Dr. Matsanga, let's just touch on this because we've only got about 40 seconds to go. ECOWAS, they're relocating their key institutions from Burkina Faso and Mali. These agencies are about 3 of them, or institutions, and they're going to be moving to Liberia, Guinea-Bissau, the third one. They're still to confirm where it's going to be moving to. Does this, in your view, promote an equal distribution and geographical balance of ECOWAS bodies? We know that Burkina Faso and Mali have withdrawn from ECOWAS, so there would definitely be changes also with the new leadership of Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio.
ECOWAS is France, funded by France. Who pays the salaries? Most of the salaries of ECOWAS are paid by donor money from the French capital. They have captured it like they have captured the hapless African Union chairperson and their whole thing. Do you see anything happening in Africa? Where is it? It was when Dlamini Zuma was in AU that you could feel you are an African. Since she left, this thing has been captured by the French. And the African presidents are not talking. They wear suits and go to Addis Ababa. I am telling you.
All right.
They train for the other countries. Sahel left a long time ago, my sister. They them not think these Sahel countries will return to ECOWAS. Impossible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matsanga. You have a great rest of your Wednesday. Dr. David Matsanga is a political scientist and conflict resolution expert, a resident expert, talking about stories making headlines in West Africa. Let's find out what's happening in the news. And as we get our news headlines, it's 6:31 Central African time. Here's Dwelani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, the Zambian government has a lawsuit against the family of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu, seeking to stop his burial in South Africa today. A UN-mandated commission investigating suspected human rights violations and war crimes in the Democratic Republic of Congo cannot proceed due to a funding crisis in the UN Human Rights Office. And finally, UNICEF has sharply criticized the system for distributing food aid in Gaza by the Israel and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The UNICEF spokesperson, James Alder, who has just visited the territory, says depriving a population of food and then forcing them to go to a combat zone to receive aid was absurd. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Well, to help us rise and shine on the sports front, it's time to say good morning to Figile Lingwati. Good morning, my brother.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, guys. Let me tell you, it is Springbok time. Springbok coach Rassie Erasmus has named 4 uncapped players in a quality team to face the Barbarians for the Qatar Airways Cup in Cape Town on Saturday in their opening match of the international season. Asenati Ntlabaganye, prop, Vincent Chiduka, flanker, have both been named in a relatively experienced starting lineup, while Manas van der Merwe in hooker and Nietleng Fouché, prop, will feature alongside a few Rugby World Cup winners and seasoned campaigners on the replacement bench. Another notable inclusion in the starting team was Lua Diagar, who will partner with Jean Klein in the engine room. Now, football news. Former Banyana defender Nugu Matlo has advised Banyana team to be united if they want to make it far in the Women's Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco in July. Banyana go into the competition as defending champions after clinching the title in 2022. Matlo says if the national team works well together, they will be able to defend the title.
What Banyana need to do well in the WAFCON is to be united and work together, because that is an important thing, because if they are chained, they're working together and they will achieve what they want.
Banyana are in Group C with Ghana, Tanzania and Mali. Their opening match will be against Ghana, a team that missed out in the 2022 WAFCON, and Matlo acknowledges that it will not be an easy game.
To play in Ghana, it's not easy. It's going to be tough, but I think if the team, they can work together, they can pull each other and work as a team. I think we can do well against Ghana, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be walk in the park. In the park, they need to work even harder to win the first game, because it's very important to win first game.
Zimbabwe head coach Justin Simon says his team is looking forward to testing themselves against world champions South Africa in the 2-match test series that gets underway in Bulawayo on Saturday. The Proteas arrived in Zimbabwe having beaten Australia in the World Test Championship final at Lord's earlier this month, breaking an ICC trophy drought that spanned for 27 years. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figida Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrado com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. Wake up, Africa. Beda Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
And now it's time to check in with the world of business as we get our economics update from Nosipo Zuma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. In your business news this hour, issues as the U.S. tariffs on African exports and the imposition of visa and travel restrictions on some African countries have come under the spotlight at the U.S.-Africa Business Summit in the Angolan capital, Luanda. The meeting, which concludes today, has gathered a significant number of high-level attendees, including African presidents, heads of government, ministers, senior U.S. government officials, and leaders from U.S. and African companies. They are hoping to foster economic cooperation and investment between the United States and Africa. Phil Nello is an independent commentator.
We had the Secretary General of the African Union who actually raised this issue, this concern about the United States wanted to do business with the African countries, the same time that they are imposing new restrictions on visa for some African countries. And the answer came immediately from Mr. Troy Fitzgerald, who is the head of the African Affairs at the State Department, who assured Africans that there has been no further restriction on African countries in order to do business with Africa or Africans traveling to the United States.
Zambian Transport Minister Frank Tayali says Zambia hopes to start work on the Lobito Corridor railway connecting its copper belt to Angola's Atlantic coast by the third quarter of 2026. He says the project is moving forward amid financial negotiations. The corridor will link Zambia's Chingola region to Angola's Benguela railway line at Lucano and is expected to span over 530 kilometers and serve as key export route for copper and agricultural goods. South Africa's Cape Peninsula University of Technology Innovation expert Professor Michael Tumdako says there is a lot of great potential for young and emerging entrepreneurs to venture into the tourism sector. Tumdako was speaking at the 7th Africa Youth in Tourism Innovation Summit underway in Midrand, north of Johannesburg. The event, which has brought together industry leaders from different parts of Africa, is focused on youth entrepreneurship, small enterprise development, personal transformation, and self-actualization. Tumdako has urged young people to come up with something that has never been seen before.
you might be coming out with a product that already exists. You need to know whether there is a similar product somewhere and you are competing with that product. So how would you differentiate your product from that? And most often we don't do that. And we have all these youth coming with ideas, but they are faced with competition. So one, when you are faced with competition, that means your market access is restricted. Right, and so how do you really then differentiate yourself to take even less than 1% or 2% of the market?
Some economists in South Africa are hopeful of a gradual improvement in jobs and numbers after data released by Stats SA showed employment in the formal sector, excluding agriculture, which fell by 0.7% in the first quarter of 2025. The quarterly employment statistics show full-time employment in the formal sector dropped by 55,000 jobs, while part-time employment fell by 19,000. Standard Bank economist Elna Moorman.
We see a decline in government employment and also relatively broad-based declines in the private sector. We also note that wages kept pace with inflation, which is of course at this stage still quite low. But there was such severe pressure on bonus payments that total income didn't even keep pace with low inflation. Part of the weakness in the economy in the first quarter of the year is, of course, attributable to severe political and policy uncertainty both globally and domestically. And this unfortunately hardly improved in the second quarter of the year. We are looking for some improvement in the economy in the second half of the year, and that should be followed by a recovery in the labour market in due course.
And finally, French investigators have ordered Tesla to stop what they call deceptive business practices or face thousands of dollars in fines. Investigators at the French Finance Ministry's Competition, Consumer Affairs and Fraud Control Office say the automaker has engaged in deceptive commercial practices over the fully autonomous driving capabilities of its cars and has issued sales contracts with no date, time or place of vehicle delivery and has failed to provide timely refunds, among other infractions. The office ordered Tesla to comply with regulations within the 4 months or face fines of $43,000 a day after that date until it complies. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 549. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 36. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 50, and in Zambia it's 23 kwacha 20. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rand 51. Russia is 78 rubles 25. India is 86 rupees 62. China at 7 yuan 18, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 18 rand cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,330 and platinum at $1,314 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $68.04 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Vue d'Afrique avec Joël Mouteba.
Alors peut-on considérer cette décision comme un désengagement durable des États-Unis vis-à-vis du développement africain ou s'agit-il d'un simple réalignement stratégique?
Bon, ça peut être les deux à la fois. Donc, au lieu de donner de l'argent à la Banque africaine de développement pour partager en vrac, ils préfèrent maintenant donc cibler les pays partenaires en Afrique. Donc, ça, c'est pour le réalignement stratégique. Alors, et aussi, ce n'est pas un désengagement durable, mais je pense que dans les 2 ou 3 prochaines années, il veut d'abord remettre de l'ordre dans ses affaires.
Vue d'Afrique. Du lundi au vendredi de 15h à 16h, temps universel.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
It's time now for our G20 fact of the day. Now, prior to the African Union joining the Group of 20, a collection of the world's largest economies, commonly known as the G20, as a permanent member in 2023, the G20 represented 85% of global GDP.
Advertisers. Channel Africa is more than just a platform.
And 2/3 of the world's population. The inclusion of the African Union is particularly significant as it now represents 55 member states with a combined GDP of $3 trillion and a population of 1.4 billion people. And that is our G20 fact for the day.
G20 in Africa. Exclusive to Channel Africa. Championing Africa through solidarity, equality and sustainability.
Vue d'Afrique avec Joël Mouteba.
Alors peut-on considérer cette décision comme un désengagement durable des États-Unis vis-à-vis du développement africain ou s'agit-il d'un simple réalignement stratégique?
Bon, ça peut être les deux à la fois. Donc, au lieu de donner de l'argent à la Banque africaine de développement pour partager en vrac, ils préfèrent maintenant donc cibler les pays partenaires en Afrique. Donc, ça, c'est pour le réalignement stratégique. Alors, et aussi, ce n'est pas un désengagement durable, mais je pense que dans les 2 ou 3 prochaines années, il veut d'abord remettre de l'ordre dans ses affaires.
Vue d'Afrique. Du lundi au vendredi de 15h à 16h, temps universel.
Wake up, Africa. Beda, Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
U.S. Federal Chair Jerome Powell says despite uncertainty and potential rise in inflation brought on by tariffs, the U.S. economy remains solid. He says the Fed would hold interest rates until there is clarity on tariffs. This as U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to announce the final stance on tariffs on July 9th. Powell says inflation is expected to increase significantly in the third quarter of this year. Dimakadzo Lishodo filed this report.
U.S. Federal Chair Jerome Powell has come under political pressure since Donald Trump came into office. Ahead of his appearance before the House Committee on Financial Services at the U.S. Congress, Trump posted on his Truth social media platform saying that Powell must explain why he's refusing to lower interest rates, adding that Europe has had 10 cuts, we've had 0. No inflation, great economy. We should at least be at 10 to 3 points lower, he said. Powell says a decision to cut rates is data determined. He stated that projections on inflation show that a spike is expected in the third quarter.
And at the end of the day, we do what we think is the right thing when we think it's the right thing to do. We don't take into consideration political factors.
Member of the committee, Bill Huizenga, pressed him on the Fed's monetary policy stance.
There's no recession. That's been established. There's no hyperinflation, or certainly not as what some had been projecting. So what is it that's keeping, in your mind, the Fed from what many of us believe is the right thing to do, which is to lower some interest rates? And why aren't we doing what the rest of the world is doing?
You're right that if you just look in the rearview mirror and look at the existing data that we've seen, you can make a good argument that would call for us to be at a neutral level, which would be a couple of cuts or maybe more kind of thing. The reason we're not is the forecast by all professional forecasters that I know of on the outside and the Fed do expect a meaningful increase in inflation over the course of this year.
In a veiled attack, chair of the committee, French Hill, told Powell to stay in his lane when it comes to tariffs.
In February of 2021, you told us in this committee that you would stay in your lane and not comment on President Biden's proposal for the American Rescue Plan or sharply increasing federal spending. And you said it was an issue, but that you would stay in your lane and not comment on it. But here in this year, you have commented on this idea of tariffs being set by the executive branch. So are tariffs in your lane?
Sure. So we haven't commented, and it would be inappropriate for us to comment on the policy of tariffs. We don't have a view. It's not our job, and we just wouldn't do that. And just as we wouldn't comment on the reconciliation package that you're working on right now. We're not commenting on tariffs. What our job is inflation, keeping inflation under control, and also keeping maximum employment. And when policies have what appear to be short and medium term implications, meaningful implications for that, then they kind of not the policies themselves, but the inflation becomes our job.
Powell says while the world's largest economy remains solid at the moment, there's a lot of uncertainty because of the tariffs, with July 9 looming, where some sort of direction is expected from President Trump. The Fed chair also addressed talk about possibly doing away with the US dollar as a reserve currency.
What makes us the reserve currency is a few things. It is our great democratic institutions. It is that we have open capital markets, very open capital markets, and it is that we have price stability and the rule of law. Those are the things that make you the reserve currency, and you can keep that status as long as you maintain those things. Of those things, the thing that we contribute is price stability over the long run. So people who want to invest in or use the dollar, they can be confident in the value of the dollar over time, that it won't fluctuate wildly or decline in ways that, and so that's our role. Really, Treasury is responsible for stewardship of the dollar, but we have that role to play as well.
The U.S. decision on interest rates has a significant impact on the cost of dollar-held debt, which many African countries have a lot of. The cost of debt is now crowding out other crucial spending, raising the debt-to-GDP ratio, leaving African economies in a perpetual cycle of indebtedness. The recently released report by the Vatican-backed Jubilee Debt Commission has called for urgent and systemic reforms to address the spiraling debt and development crises devastating countries in the global south. For Channel Africa News in Johannesburg, I'm Dimakazo Leshoro.
And now for a story that's always close to our hearts as journalists, press freedom. In response to the growing challenges confronting press freedom in the digital era, the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom is convening a 2-week international seminar titled Freedom of the Press Challenges in a Digital Age, held at the Foundation's International Academy for Leadership in Gummersbach in Germany. The seminar brings together journalists, media professionals, liberal thought leaders, and civil society activists from around the world. Channel Africa's Michael Mbewe is there, and he filed this report from the seminar.
The purpose of the seminar is to interrogate and provide liberal responses to the following questions. What can media professionals and others do to ensure that the press and other media fulfill their critical role in holding leaders to account and in providing quality, credible services for their respective audiences? What to do to protect their security and independence? How can freedom of the media be preserved, protected, and promoted as a key tenet for liberal thought, and how to respond to the societal breakdowns resulting from the weaponization of information? Speaking to Channel Africa on the seminar's opening day on Monday, the seminar's facilitator, Kylie Hatton, had the following to say.
I think the most important reason why the seminar is so important right now is because you can see in a world where there is so much conflict and there is so many people operating on the extremes. This seminar shows you that there is a possibility to create spaces for people to have conversations. And I think if we're going to navigate our way through this very complex world right now, we have to find ways of having conversations. And those are very much conversations that have to happen face to face. Because it's when you're sitting across from the table from someone, you're talking to them in a room, you're getting to understand them, look them in the eye, that relationships are built. And that's really what I want to encourage when we talk about freedom of the press, is creating the spaces for those conversations.
And how will participants benefit from this August seminar? Kylie Hatton elaborates.
In terms of the impact of the seminar for the participants, my hope is that the participants will be able to walk away from the seminar with some ideas of how they can look for the opportunities and some of the challenges that they are faced with in the media world right now. Look for some of the reforms we possibly want to motivate for, possibly regulations, what are the correct regulations we want to be looking at, and what are the policy approaches that we want to be taking to protect the freedom of the press and to protect the media, because the media is one of the most fundamental institutions of democracies. And if democracies do not have a free press, they will not succeed and they will not thrive.
The seminar has attracted a diversity of participants from Latin America, Europe, Asia, Middle East, and Africa. Milena Popovic is a journalist and human rights activist from Serbia, a country grappling with disinformation. She also serves as a member of an NGO called Center for Responsibility, Accountability and Research.
I think that this program will encourage me to continue my fight against disinformation in Serbia, but also I think that I will find a knowledge that I miss to fight against disinformation in the digital world. Disinformation in my country is not just one separating thing in digital age. The manipulation is the dominant tool of governments in my country, and we are fighting against mechanisms which include institutions, politicians, media, captured media, but also the bad actors on the social media. So we have a really strong enemy because it's a factory of fake news.
Speaking from the African perspective, Nonkululeko Nchilo is with the Daily Maverick from South Africa. He is overwhelmed with excitement over her attendance.
I'm very excited to be attending this Friedrich Naumann Foundation seminar that is taking place here in Germany. It is at media freedom, misinformation, as well as disinformation in the digital age. I think it's important, especially as South Africa navigates the rapid rise of AI, the growing influence of social media journalism. I do think it's essential to stay ahead of the curve and just ready to absorb, insight from my global peers and take them back home in South Africa.
Another excited participant is Buruk Otuk, a journalist from Turkey with Euronews, says he's challenging the narrative in his country.
Thanks to the FNF, I am here in Kumbarsva for the press freedom seminars, and the program is amazing. I mean, in all around the world, every journalist has a problem about the mental health, about the press freedom, of course, about the misinformation, disinformation, and I am challenging also in Turkey about that. Also, we are challenging with new technologies and like AI, but I find the AI as useful. This program, I think it will help me to understand how the global issues on journalism and how can we find the global solutions.
Channel Africa also spoke with Emma Lois Honye, a photojournalist from Zimbabwe focusing on human rights, equality and climate change, who acknowledges both the excitement and fear surrounding AI, noting widespread concerns about its impact.
For me, this seminar is very important because I like the fact that the seminar is centering on artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence has been a topic of interest to many people in different faculties and careers, and specifically in my career, there are a lot of threats, fears, and people are scared. Some are happy. I use AI every day in my daily work, but through the seminar, I hope to learn more ways to safeguard my information and to learn how to better my job using AI.
Michael Mbewe, Channel African News, Gummersberg, Germany.
Yeah, Michael, one of a great assignment there to be in Germany. But they're talking about really important things that concern us, particularly as journalists. And luckily, we work in a country where journalism is free, and we can do and say what we need to do, obviously, within the confines of the law. All right, so today in history, well, we're going to be looking at this a little bit more before the end of the show today. In the next hour, Mozambique gained its independence from Portugal, officially becoming an independent state on the 25th of June 1975 after a decade-long armed struggle by Frelimo, led, of course, by Samora Machel. And in 1962, on this day, various African liberation movements, including the MPLA in Angola, intensified efforts to mobilize support in exile as part of the continent-wide push against colonial rule. So a lot happening during that time. And across the globe, what was going on? Well, Michael Jackson died age 50 today in 2009. And I remember that was a a massive shock to the world. It's literally stopped the music world and beyond. Anyway, it is 7 o'clock Central African time, and that means we're getting ready for another hour of the program. Asanda?
Good morning. If you've just joined us, thanks for doing just that. And remember, you can find us on our social media platforms at Channel Africa 1. Is where you can get in touch with us. We'd love to hear your views and your questions about our programming. With you until 9 this morning. So we enter the second hour now of Rise and Shine. And this hour we'll be looking also at Kenyans who are preparing to hold protests today, marking 1 year since last year's deadly finance bill demonstrations. That story and more coming up. After the news, here's Jwalane Tulo Mwepe, and then Fikile Lingwati will follow with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
The president of the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, Beda, Dr. Sidi Ould Tah, he is vying for the presidency of the African Development Bank, the AFDB. He positions himself as a fervent defender of economic integration and structural transformation on the African continent.
Well, I do believe that I have a 360 view of the development challenges in the continent with my experience from both the supply side and the demand side. But more importantly, my vision is to bring on board all the stakeholders and to have a holistic approach for the development of the continent and to develop partnership across the continent and outside the continent, bringing all the stakeholders together to work for one goal is to make Africa green for life and livelihood of the African population.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. SABC News, the African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The Zambian government has filed a lawsuit against the family of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu, seeking to stop his burial in South Africa today. The government argues that no burial should take place until disputes surrounding the former leader's final resting place are resolved. Bonolo Maribe has more.
Several of Edgar Lungu's family members, alongside the funeral service company holding his remains, are named in the lawsuit filed by Zambia's Attorney General, Mulilo Kabesha. Kabesha says that the former president should be buried in Zambia with full military honors, in line with Zambian law and traditions. He argues that state funerals are national events governed by strict protocols and that the public must take priority over personal wishes.
A UN-mandated commission investigating suspected human rights violations and war crimes in the Democratic Republic of Congo cannot proceed due to a funding crisis in the UN Human Rights Office. The OHCHR is facing a major cash crunch caused by some countries failing to fully pay their contributions. This has also been compounded by major cuts in foreign aid by the United States under President Donald Trump. In February, a special session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva agreed to set up a fact-finding mission and a formal commission of inquiry to investigate rights violations, including massacres and sexual violence in North and South Kivu in the east of the DRC. The former Prime Minister of Sudan, Abdallah Hamdok, has called on South Africa to assist the Sudanese to engage in a dialogue with the aim of ending the war in that country. Hamdok says not much is done to return Sudan to democracy. He believes that South Africa's involvement will prove to be beneficial.
And we would like South Africa to get involved more actively in our case. His Excellency, the President Cyril Ramaphosa. And he assured us that South Africa will definitely be involved in the Sudanese conflict, help us address this. There is a lot of history between our countries. South Africa has an excellent, unique experience that can be extremely useful to us.
Advocacy group Equal Education has welcomed the launch of the Safe Schools Protocol by the South African Police Service and the Basic Education Department. The program aims to address violence and crime in schools. During the launch, Police Minister Senzo Mchunu said schools in KwaZulu-Natal, the Eastern Cape, Gauteng and the Western Cape provinces recorded high rates of learner-on-learner violence, highlighting the need for improved safety and security at schools. Community leader at Equal Education, Makanatsa Ziambi.
It's very important to consider the safety of learners in schools, because a lot of times people tend to think that schooling is just about the theory that learners get, but how safe learners are within the schools is very important, because there's a very big psychological link between how they are efficient at school and how safe they are. So I think it's very important, especially in the township areas, because that's where a lot of violent incidents occur when it comes to schools.
UNICEF has sharply criticized the system for distributing food aid in Gaza by the Israel and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The UNICEF spokesperson, James Alder, who has just visited the territory, says depriving a population of food and then forcing them to go to a combat zone to receive aid is absurd. He was speaking to the BBC after Israeli troops were reported to have killed another 46 Palestinians waiting for food handouts yesterday. Alder says the deaths would continue until the system changed.
We won't see a decrease in these, unfortunately, because there's no way to get a system right. As long as you deprive food to a majority of population and force them, the only place they can go is into a combat site, you will keep seeing these mass casualty events. It's abhorrent.
The IDF said one of the incidents of the killings on Tuesday was under review.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. Headlines at 7:30 for Channel Africa News. I'm Jolani Tulo Mwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Hawa wa Afrika Kusini wenye asili ya kizungu ambao wamepewa ukimbizi huko nchini Marekani. Je, nini chanzo cha wao kuomba ukimbizi nchini Marekani?
Wenyewe hawajaomba ukimbizi. Kuna shirika fulani inaitwa AfriForum, shirika mbili za wazungu ambao wanatetea haki ya wazungu hapa, AfriForum na Solidarity. Hao walienda Marekani kufanya kampeni kusema kwamba wazungu wananyanyaswa hapa Afrika Kusini, na walizofanya hiyo kampeni serikali iweze kuwafuatilia kujua nini ambacho mnasema kwamba mnanyanyaswa.
Kuna namna ya wao kwamba wamepoteza uraia wa Afrika Kusini, na je, endapo Trump akamaliza muda wake madarakani, uhalali wao wa kuishi nchini Marekani ukoje?
Itakuwa vigumu, kifupi itakuwa vigumu wenyewe kupoteza uraia wao.
Darubini ya Afrika 11 kamili hadi 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
In our sports headline, Mamelodi Sundowns is mourning the passing away of their former joint owner ahead of their crucial match against Fluminense today. And Zimbabwe's Olympic medalist, Casey Coventry, has officially assumed the office as the IOC president. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa. Wake up, Africa. Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Hawa wa Afrika Kusini wenye asili ya kizungu ambao wamepewa ukimbizi huko nchini Marekani. Je, nini chanzo cha wao kuomba ukimbizi nchini Marekani?
Wenyewe hawajaomba ukimbizi. Kuna shirika fulani inaitwa AfriForum, shirika mbili za wazungu ambao wanatetea haki ya wazungu hapa, AfriForum na Solidarity. Hao walienda Marekani kufanya kampeni kusema kwamba wazungu wananyanyaswa hapa Afrika Kusini, na walizofanya hiyo kampeni serikali iweze kuwafuatilia kujua nini ambacho mnasema kwamba mnanyanyaswa.
Kuna namna ya wao kwamba wamepoteza kuomba uraia wa Afrika Kusini? Na je, endapo Trump akamaliza muda wake madarakani, uhalali wao wa kuishi nchini Marekani ukoje?
Itakuwa vigumu, kifupi itakuwa vigumu wenyewe kupoteza uraia wao.
Darubini ya Afrika 11 kamili hadi 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
You like what we do on Channel Africa? Then follow us on our socials. Channel Africa 1 on all social pages. And get the African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Beda Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Well, today marks exactly half a century since Samora Machel proclaimed Mozambique's freedom at Machava Stadium. Once again, the old ground is center stage, hosting a Golden Jubilee billed under the theme 50 Years of Independence, Consolidating National Unity, Peace and Sustainable Development. And more than 40,000 citizens and at least 32 heads of state, including Portugal's President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile and Western Sahara's Brahim Ghali are in Maputo for the festivities. Yet the celebrations carry a sober undertone. Constitutional Council President Lucia Ribeiro has urged Mozambicans not to gloss over historical wounds, persistent inequalities and latent tensions as they mark this milestone. And this jubilee comes just after months of fiercely contested elections amid lingering insurgency in Cabo Delgado. Well, for the latest, we're now joined by Milton Maluleke, our correspondent in Mozambique. Milton, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Independence Day, but 50 years on, it's probably going to be like no other. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning to Channel Africa listeners.
So tell us a little bit about, where are you at this time, and what's the atmosphere like on such a significant day?
Well, I'm on my way to Estadio da Machava, where it will take place. I just made this quick stop so that I can be on air right now. Basically, this is the same stadium where in 1975, President Samora Machel proclaimed the total independence of Mozambique over the Portuguese domination here in Mozambique. So this year is a mix of feelings, whereby we see a lot of youth actually not believing anymore in this kind of celebrations, especially after the elections in October, when actually we had the riots, protests, all of that, whereby the youth actually showed to the not only to the ruling party or to the government, but also to the world, that they were actually basically tired of not seeing some changes, or not seeing the promises that they were made over all these years. So now we'll see actually the end of this monthly actually circulation of the torch that actually is a fire symbolizing the unity of the country that started actually coming from Cabo Delgado, crossing all the 10 provinces up to Maputo. So it reached Maputo a few days ago. So today, actually, it will mark the entrance of that fire to that stadium, symbolizing the unity. It sort of happens all in the first terms of all the presidents of all those years. It's the same that was done in 1975, when actually they had to show that the country is in independence. So that fire came from Cabo Delgado down to Maputo. So they will replicate that again. But we've seen that a lot of people actually, they didn't even join like the previous years in that circulation for that fire, symbolizing the unity. So this is what basically I'm saying, that it will be a mix of feelings. A lot of people actually deciding to be at home, not actually, even if having this kind of festivities in their home, not going to the stadium.
And finally, what about you, Milton? How are you feeling on this day?
Well, 50 years. Actually, what I can say is a day that I'll be waking or also reflecting over what I have seen because I don't have that 50 years, yes, so that I didn't see the struggle for the independence. But when I was kid, I saw the civil war between the government and Renamo. So that and I saw also the start of the democracy, the first elections. I've seen all of that. So anyway, I've seen also the instability created over the elections between the government and the Frelimo that was done through guerrilla, all of that. And also I've seen this for the first time, the protests that were done using mostly internet. And I can say that they were actually people were invited to join in through social media, and then we had the blockage of internet, all of that. So it's a mix of feelings whereby I'll just sit and see how it comes, or how actually where we come. Actually, I'll say that all the changes that they've seen, the presidents that came in, the promises made, and other things that were not actually other things that were actually delivered and not delivered. So anyway, it will be the day that I'll be working and also reflecting and all of that.
Sure, I understand, and I've got a sense that many people feel just the same way as you do, given that the population is quite young. Milton, thank you very much indeed, and muito obrigado. Adeus.
De nada, bom trabalho e aquele abraço.
Thank you so much. That's our correspondent in Mozambique, Milton Malolek. Important day for the country, 50 years of independence. And as he was saying, probably a lot of mixed feelings about celebration. But at the same time, there were so many hopes about where they should be now. And perhaps things haven't been quite delivered.
In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Beda, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Broadcasting in 5 different languages, connecting the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Kenyans are preparing to hold protests today, marking 1 year since last year's deadly finance bill demonstrations. 12 foreign envoys have urged the government to respect peaceful protests and condemn the use of masked police and hired goons. Kenya's Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary, Dr. Korir Singwe, responded by warning against any misuse of the protests. For more, we now connect with Channel Africa's Nairobi correspondent, Alex Kiari. Alex, how are you on this Wednesday? Good morning.
Good morning, this chilly Wednesday morning in Nairobi. Hope everything is okay over there.
Oh, well, that makes both of us. In Johannesburg, it's chilly as well. But what is the mood like there in Nairobi? Are protesters gathering already?
Not really. We're just walking up to empty streets. Police have cordoned off streets that lead to the central business district of Nairobi. And earlier on, while heading to work, to the office this morning, I came across tens of military tanks rolling into the city, probably heading towards Parliament and State House, where protesters have pledged to occupy. So far today, as we start off our broadcast over here, the streets of Nairobi are completely empty, and so far no protesters in sight, but police are patrolling the streets.
What are some of those key hotspots that police are patrolling and they are cordoning off? You mentioned Parliament.
Yes, Parliament buildings and also the offices along Harambe Avenue. And State House is also one of those key areas that are being protected. And remember that yesterday, the Inspector General of Police had pledged to provide security to protesters. But at the same time, he also warned them against moving or occupying protected areas. And so far, it seems like this is what has inspired the current security protocols, which have seen all roads leading to the city cordoned off and sealed. So very few people actually accessing the town, although we understand that there's some protesters who spent the night within the city center. So that's where we expect things to now to get hot later on in the day. And mostly, as you're aware, most protests usually in Kenya pick up from around 11 p.m. local time or East African time. Asanda.
Yesterday, it emerged with one of the chats we had on Rise and Shine with a journalist, Dennis, that there is another blogger who's been reported to have gone missing under police custody. No word has come out in terms of what's his status right now. What is going on with that part of the story as far as protesters wanting to join for the call for investigations into his disappearance as well, or are protesters not touching on that one yet?
Actually, the disappearances of, I think there are now two bloggers. One who was picked up from the coastal city of Mombasa last evening at around 8 p.m. And the one who also disappeared last Friday are some of the issues that are now aggravating the protests. And that aside, another report came in yesterday that another suspect died in a prison, in custody, in police custody in the central part of Kenya.
Wow.
So these are all things that are making the whole young people, the Gen Zs, rise up and say that they really want to have some change and ensure that there is accountability from the police so that these issues to do with extrajudicial killings, arrests without any court warrants and such are all handled, and that the police and security agencies do follow due protocol as stipulated in the law of Kenya.
What's the response been in terms of the government and authorities? We know the word from the Kenya's Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary, Dr. Korir Singwe, saying that they're warning against the misuse of protests. First of all, what does that mean? Is that understood in terms of what is the misuse of protests and how is this defined? And also, what is what are the other sentiments and responses from other government officials and authorities?
Actually, beyond the statement by the PS Singwe, there is another statement that came up yesterday from the Parliamentary Committee in charge of Foreign Affairs, which seemed to condemn the foreign embassies that had already lent the voices on the issues to do with extrajudicial killings and breaking up of protests as opposed to the law of Kenya. The president also spoke about the impending protest yesterday, and he did seem to be siding with the police. He indicated that he does support the police work. The minister in charge of internal security also did compare Kenya's protest alignments with what happens in foreign countries, especially in the US, where he did indicate that anybody who insinuates or indicates that they're willing or that they would like to invade or occupy State House or White House or 10 Downing Street are usually arrested even before they attempt to do so. So he was in a way justifying the actions of the police. And at the same time, the Foreign Affairs PS and also the chairman of the Parliamentary Committee in charge of Foreign Affairs seemed to be telling the foreign or international community to keep off Kenyan affairs, which has in itself aggravated and angered so many Kenyans, and especially the social media users and those who are planning the Gen Z protests today. So it is just a way of reminding them that we have the laws that are not being followed, and that the people behind breaking of this law and the culture of impunity are the ones actually who are supposed to be the custodians of these laws.
Anything that happened overnight in terms of authorities issuing warnings or police visibility?
Not really. They did not say anything apart from pledging to offer security to protesters and also warning people against occupying protected areas. But there has been some agitation online, and also yesterday evening, some of the protesters had held a service, an interdenominational and inter-religious service outside the Kenya National Archives in anticipation of the protest. And we understand, as I said, that some of them actually did spend the night within the town so that they can be able to beat the police cordon and be at the city center and do the agitation as they have pledged to do so.
In terms of solidarity from other parts of the region, have you received any, as reporters, have you heard anything in the media? And even if other parts of the continent will be traveling to join in these protests from people from outside of Kenya?
Actually, as you're aware, in the region, the most vibrant media is usually found in Kenya, and so far we have not seen any kind of support in either in the legacy or in the social media platforms on any kind of support that the Gen Z protesters are going to get. However, there is the moral support where Kenyan Gen Zs are being urged to take responsibility, to take charge of the protest, and to ensure that they come out in large numbers. And this is usually coming from Tanzania and Uganda, which, especially Tanzania, which seems to be in some crosshairs of Kenyan Gen Z protesters after the arrest of Kenyan activists in that country, and also the Ugandan who was also incarcerated together with Kenyans in Tanzania. So there is that aspect of moral support, but not any pledge by any entity or individuals to join the protests in Nairobi, in the Nairobi streets, because of the fact that the democratic space within the region is shrinking, and there are these allegations of extrajudicial killings and unlawful incarceration of anybody who seems to be opposing the sitting government. And this comes in the wake of the Ugandan president pledging to vie for another seat, for another term in State House, almost 40 years after he took power. I'm talking about President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda.
How do you expect these protests, Alex, to pan out as far as social media posts are concerned, especially given the backdrop of all these bloggers that seem to be disappearing, two who have died?
Actually, as it has always been, we usually talk about peaceful protests, but it degenerates into something different, leading to killings and deaths. And we definitely know that this is going to be the case. And that aside, we will also be expecting the aftermath to continue, and this will be in the name and shape of more abductions and, if possibly, killings. But so far, what we understand is that the police, due to the recent backlash that they have endured, could be more restrained in terms of confronting protesters, but they will definitely go very hard on those people behind the protests, and those who might stand out after the protest today. But we do not expect anything different beyond injuries, beyond confrontations, and also possibly even the killings. And that aside, remember that we had also done an expose on the possible use of goons, as we know them here, but these are just criminal gangs, and that could also play out in the whole matrix, because we know that usually politicians in Kenya use criminal groups as counter protest measures to curb the intensity and the issues that are being raised by those who are taken to the streets. So those are the things that are going to be happening, and we cover them as they come.
Thank you so much again for your time, Alex, and we'll check in again tomorrow possibly.
Thank you very much, and have a good day.
You too. Alex Kiari, our correspondent in Kenya, joining us live from the capital, Nairobi, in anticipation of protest action there for today.
Former South African President Thabo Mbeki says that the situation in the Middle East has an impact not only on the region but also on many other countries. Mbeki, who celebrated his 83rd birthday on Sunday, chose to weigh in on the current peace and security challenges around the world, especially focusing on the current wars in the Middle East and Sudan. Bonolo Moriba picks up the story.
It was a day to celebrate and to be showered with presents. In his speech, former President Thabo Mbeki maintained the tradition of reading and following the news. He called on the international community not to be silent about the dangerous situation developing in the Middle East.
just a conflict. Everybody in the world has been saying this conflict around Iran should be solved by negotiations, by peaceful means. But the way it's moving now, it's escalating towards even more violence, more people dead, more destruction. It's worrying.
However, he warned that the most impactful war is the one raging in Sudan on the African continent.
The number of people who are dying in Sudan now is larger than the number of people that are dying in Gaza and Ukraine together. The larger numbers of people are dying in Sudan. So the Sudanese said, do something. So we made a commitment, give it. As a foundation, we said, all right, we will do something.
The former Prime Minister of Sudan, Abdallah Hamdok, made a plea for more intervention.
We would like South Africa to get involved more actively in our case. His Excellency, the President Cyril Ramaphosa. And he assured us that South Africa will definitely be involved in the Sudanese conflict, help us address this. There is a lot of history between our countries. South Africa has an excellent, unique experience that can be extremely useful to us.
Meanwhile, some Sudanese are in South Africa to seek advice from Pretoria and eminent South Africans to ensure that Africa leads efforts to stop fighting in Sudan. Bonolo Maribe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right, it's time now for your news headlines because it is hour. Good morning, Jwalani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, the Zambian government has filed a lawsuit against the family of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu, seeking to stop his burial in South Africa today. Hundreds of people in Kenya are expected to take to the streets across the country today to mark the one-year anniversary since the start of the anti-tax demonstrations that left at least 60 people dead. And finally, a court in Japan has sentenced a U.S. Marine stationed at the American base in Okinawa to 7 years in prison for sexual assault. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Broadcasting in 5 different languages, connecting the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
It's time now to check in with the world of sports. Here's Fikile Lingwati with your details.
In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Sports on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
And we kick off with football news. Mamelodi Sundowns are gearing up for a high-stakes clash against Brazilian giants Fluminense in the FIFA Club World Cup Group F encounter with a potent attacking Arsenal that could prove decisive. The showdown is set for tonight and is not just a continental clash but also a battle of footballing styles, and individual brilliance will likely play a central role. All eyes will be on the tantalizing duel between Fluminense's legendary defender Thiago Silva and Sundowns midfielder Dynamo Lucas Ribeiro. While Silva brings a wealth of experience from elite clubs like Chelsea and PSG, he'll be up against a younger compatriot who's bursting with creativity and composure. With the stage set and pressure mounting, fans across the country are eager to see whether this dynamic Sundowns outfit can outlast their South American opponents and book their spot in the next phase of the competition. And former Banyana Banyana defender Nugumatlo has advised the Banyana Banyana team to be united if they want to make it far in the Women's Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco in July. Banyana go into the competition as defending champions after clinching the title in 2022. Matlo says if the national team works well together, they will be able to defend the title.
What Banyana need to do well in the WAFCON is to be united and work together, because that is an important thing, because if they are chained, they're working together, they will achieve what they want.
Banyana are in Group C with Ghana, Tanzania and Mali. Their opening match will be against Ghana, a team that missed out in the 2022 WAFCON, and Matlu acknowledges that it will not be an easy game.
To play in Ghana, it's not easy. It's going to be tough, but I think if the team, they can work together, they can pull each other and work as a team. I think we can do well against Ghana, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be walk in the park. In the park, they need to work even harder to win the first game, because it's very important to win first game.
History making and Zimbabwe's most decorated Olympian, Kirsty Coventry, has officially taken the helm of the International Olympic Committee, IOC, becoming the first woman ever to lead the global sporting body. Coventry assumed office replacing outgoing President Thomas Bach of Germany, who stepped down after serving for 12 years. Her appointment marks a new era, not just for the IOC, but for African presentation in international sports leadership. She was elected during the IOC's 144th session held in Greece in March, emerging victorious from a competitive field of 7 high-profile candidates. And we end with the golf news. James Piot will be teeing off in this week's PGA Tour Rocket Classic in Detroit on a sponsor's exemption, the first in a PGA event for an ex-LIV golf player. 26-year-old American, a Michigan native, is one of the few players to play events on the PGA Tour and the Saudi-backed Upstart Series, whose players are banned from PGA events. Piot, the 2021 U.S. Amateur champion, missed the Cup in the 2002 PGA Tour starts, so he signed a reported $6 million 2-year LIV golf deal and played in the first LIV event in June 2022 at London. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lengwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Broadcasting in 5 different languages, connecting the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
And it's time now to find out what's happening in the world of business as we say good morning to Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the Public Service Commission of South Africa says government owes over $909 million in leave payouts to nearly 190,000 employees. Now, these are employees who were employed in the public service sector before July 2000. Commissioner Anel Goyeya says the total capped leave liability represents approximately 14% of the total public service workforce, most of whom are older workers in the education and health sectors.
We need to sell our animals to feedlots. This is the time of the year where we usually generate our income, and now everything holds to a standstill. So the big issue is basically an economic crisis and not so much animal disease or animal health crisis. So let's say, for example, you're in the Northwest, even if you have received your vaccines and the animals was vaccinated and you can start to slaughter them, if there's no registered abattoir for FMD slaughters close to you, you can basically not market your animals.
The Red Meat Producers Organization of South Africa, the RPO, says the foot and mouth outbreak is more than an economic crisis than an animal health crisis. It says that while the state-led vaccination program has kicked off, much more needs to be done to provide market access to affected farmers through foot and mouth certification abattoirs. Friki Murray of the RPO.
We need to sell our animals to feedlots. This is the time of the year where we usually generate our income, and now everything holds to a standstill. So the big issue is basically an economic crisis and not so much animal disease or animal health crisis. So let's say, for example, you're in the Northwest, even if you have received your vaccines and the animals was vaccinated and you can start to slaughter them, if there's no registered abattoir for FMD slaughters close to you, you can basically not market your animals.
Issues such as the U.S. tariffs on African exports and the imposition of visa and travel restrictions, as some of African countries have come under the spotlight at the U.S.-Africa Business Summit in the Angolan capital, Luanda. The meeting, which concludes today, has gathered a significant number of high-level attendees, including African presidents, heads of government, ministers, senior U.S. government officials, and leaders from U.S. and African companies. They are hoping to foster economic cooperation and investment between the United States and Africa. Phil Nello is an independent
We had the Secretary General of the African Union who actually raised this issue, this concern about the United States wanted to do business with the African countries, the same time that they are imposing new restrictions on visa for some African countries. And the answer came immediately from Mr. Troy Fitzgerald, who is the head of the African Affairs at the State Department, who assured Africans that there has been no further restriction on African countries in order to do business with Africa or Africans traveling to the United States.
Zambian Transport Minister Frank Tayali says Zambia hopes to start work on the Lobito Corridor Railway connecting its copper belt to Angola's Atlantic coast by the third quarter of 2026. He says the project is moving forward amid financial negotiations. The corridor will link Zambia's Chikola region to Angola's Benguela railway line at Lucano and is expected to span over 530 kilometers and serve as a key export route for copper and agricultural goods. Tali says the multinational project has garnered interest from the United States, the European Union, and regional stakeholders. And finally, French investigators have ordered Tesla to stop what they call deceptive business practices or face thousands of dollars in fines. Investigators at the French Finance Ministry's Competition, Consumer Affairs and Fraud Control Office say the automaker has engaged in deceptive commercial practices over the fully autonomous driving capabilities of its cars, has issued sales contracts with no dates, time or place of vehicle delivery, and has failed to provide timely refunds, among other infractions. The office ordered Tesla to comply with regulations within 4 months or face fines of $43,000 a day after that date until it complies. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 Naira 549. In Botswana, it's 13.36. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 50, and in Zambia is 23 kwacha 20. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rupee 51. Russia is 78 rubles 25. India is 86 rupees 62. China is 7 yuan 18, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 18 rand cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,330 and platinum at $1,314 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $68.04 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa, meet Beda.
Yeah, that's me.
Beda is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Beda and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you'll be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Broadcasting in 5 different languages, connecting the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time, only on Channel Africa. In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Beda, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa, meet Beda.
Yeah, that's me.
Beda is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Beda and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you'll be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Beda, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time, only on Channel Africa.
U.S. Federal Chair Jerome Powell says despite uncertainty and potential rise in inflation brought on by tariffs, the U.S. economy remains solid. He says the Fed would hold interest rates until there is clarity on tariffs. This as U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to announce the final stance on tariffs on July 9th. Powell says inflation is expected to increase significantly in the third quarter of this year. Timagazzo Lishoro filed this report.
U.S. Federal Chair Jerome Powell has come under political pressure since Donald Trump came into office. Ahead of his appearance before the House Committee on Financial Services at the U.S. Congress, Trump posted on his Truth social media platform saying that Powell must explain why he's refusing to lower interest rates, adding that Europe has had 10 cuts, we've had 0. No inflation, great economy. We should at least be at 10 to 3 points lower, he said. Powell says a decision to cut rates is data determined. He stated that projections on inflation show that a spike is expected in the third quarter.
And at the end of the day, we do what we think is the right thing when we think it's the right thing to do. We don't take into consideration political factors.
Member of the committee, Bill Heisinger, pressed him on the Fed's monetary policy stance.
There's no recession. That's been established. There's no hyperinflation, or certainly not as what some had been projecting. So what is it that's keeping, in your mind, the Fed from what many of us believe is the right thing to do, which is to lower some interest rates? And why aren't we doing what the rest of the world is doing?
You're right that if you just look in the rearview mirror and look at the existing data that we've seen, you can make a good argument that would call for us to be at a neutral level, which would be a couple of cuts or maybe more kind of thing. The reason we're not is the forecast by all professional forecasters that I know of on the outside and the Fed do expect a meaningful increase in inflation over the course of this year.
In a veiled attack, chair of the committee, French Hill, told Powell to stay in his lane when it comes to tariffs.
In February of 2021, you told us in this committee that you would stay in your lane and not comment on President Biden's proposal for the American Rescue Plan or sharply increasing federal spending. And you said it was an issue, but that you would stay in your lane and not comment on it. But here in this year, you have commented on this idea of tariffs being set by the executive branch. So are tariffs in your lane?
Sure. So we haven't commented, and it would be inappropriate for us to comment on the policy of tariffs. We don't have a view. It's not our job, and we just wouldn't do that. And just as we wouldn't comment on the reconciliation package that you're working on right now. We're not.
U.S. Federal Chair Jerome Powell ending that report by Timagazzo Lishoro.
Let's turn our attention to London now, where the third annual London Indaba opened yesterday, bringing together investors, bankers and mining executives to debate how Africa can secure a bigger slice of the clean energy and minerals boom. Now, Team South Africa has used the gathering to launch its newly approved critical minerals and metals strategy, a blueprint that shifts the country's focus from exporting bulk ore to building battery hydrogen fuel cell and other downstream industries at home. And to unpack the strategy and what it means for South Africa and the continent, we're now joined live from London by the Deputy Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Phumzile Mgcina. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, Deputy Minister. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning to yourself and all listeners who are listening to your show.
Tell us a little bit more about this London Indaba, why Team South Africa is there, and why it's important generally for our continent.
No, thank you very much. We are here as Team South Africa to meet with investors who are here, who are willing to come and invest in South Africa, but most importantly to present our critical minerals and metal strategy that we just adopted as the cabinet or as South Africa. Because you find that as the technology advances, we are becoming increasingly dependent on the new generation of minerals and critical minerals. So here we are having captains of industry, all of them that are here. So ours is to present our case and also attract them to come back and invest in South Africa. And surprisingly, you'll find most of people who are doing business here in London, originally they are coming from South Africa. So it is our duty to make sure as government that they come back and invest in terms of infrastructure, in terms of reskilling, in terms of job opportunities, because all those challenges they are facing it's not like government will deal with them, especially when it comes to unemployment, but we need private sector to come on board using our minerals so that we can open job opportunities, open business opportunities. So by doing that, we won't be able to achieve it alone as government. So we need private sector to come and invest in South Africa. So we are here. It's very interesting. I've met a number of people who wants to come, but there are challenges, I must say, mostly when it comes to our policies. But we are currently reviewing our policies so that we can align ourselves so that investors, they can come back and invest in South Africa.
For listeners who perhaps haven't seen the document, give us the top 3 objectives that the strategy aims to achieve.
The strategy firstly wants to attract investors to come and invest in South Africa. We've got a number of minerals that are there, of which are needed by the world since we are transforming. We know that we are moving from we are moving from cars to use petrol. Now we are moving to electrical vehicles. So we need those minerals to assist in terms of transforming. We've got platinum, manganese, iron ore, coal, chrome. Those that form part of critical minerals, copper, cobalt, lithium. And those minerals that I've just mentioned are needed by the global. So if we are not speaking about them, we'll never get investors to come and invest in South Africa. So the aim of the strategy is for us to speak about beneficiation, that as much as they are coming to invest in South Africa, but we must also benefit from our minerals, because most of the time you'll find that miners or investors will come and extract the minerals, then they leave the country with the raw material as it is. But now we are saying before we export our raw materials, we must add value to them so that we can be able to create jobs, but most importantly, to have a revenue as a country. So we are discussing all those things. I know the issue of beneficiation has become one of the issues that we've discussed, but we must be hard on it, because if we're going to say investors, they must come to Africa and mine, then they leave, we won't benefit from our mineral resources. So we are saying as much as they are prepared to come to spend their money, to spend their resources, but they must also note that we must also benefit as the country through our mineral resources, mostly since we've presented this strategy of critical minerals and metals.
Deputy Minister, I've been a journalist a really long time now, and this beneficiation issue has been one that I've had conversations with many of your predecessors. Are we making any progress at all in terms of that ambition?
Yes, we are making progress, even though it's not easy, but we are. You see, if we are talking about beneficiation, we are saying people must benefit from their minerals and resources in the country. You'll find that some of the mining companies, they're building school bridges, they're also creating job opportunities in some areas. They're also reskilling, they're also creating business opportunities. That's beneficiation. But the problem here, some of them, they're not taking that into their consideration. Hence, I'm saying we must be hard on beneficiation. Those who are willing to come, they must know that there is a beneficiation. You are correct. We've been saying this as government. It's not an easy policy to implement, but there are mining companies who are coming on board who are willing to work with us in terms of beneficiation.
I wonder, with the G20 being chaired by South Africa, how does all of this fit into what your ambitions are, what you're doing in London, and the bigger picture, especially with the globe essentially going to be in South Africa this year?
We're going to have a ministerial roundtables whereby we are discussing such things with ministers within the continent, those ministers who we are attending President's G20, and each and every platform that we get, ours is to promote our critical minerals. So we'll use that opportunity. But also what we are saying, as much as we are saying investors, they must come to South Africa, but we must also consider that as a continent, South Africa becomes the gateway for other countries who also have their critical minerals to attract investors in terms of transporting our ports. There are a number of things that we are prepared to discuss them on roundtables, meetings that we're going to have towards the G20 in November.
Deputy Minister, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us, and good luck with this very important mission in London.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. That's the Deputy Minister of Minerals and Petroleum Resources in South Africa, Phumzile Mgcina, who's joining us there to talk about this third annual London Indaba, which opened yesterday in the UK, and that's to try and attract investors to South Africa and I think generally to the continent. It's a little bit before 8 o'clock and news, and you're with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda.
A very good morning. And if you've just joined us, well, you still have another hour to catch up in terms of what's happening on our continent and around us. And we'll be having our Wednesday profile as per usual on our Wednesdays. Thanks for joining us on this 25th of June. Remember, you can get in touch with us. We have a question actually that we posted on X. I always say we are on every single social media platform that you can think of, and X is one of them. At Channel Africa 1 is our handle. We're asking today, Zambia has filed a lawsuit against the family of the late former Zambian president Edgar Lungu, seeking to stop his burial in South Africa today. Do you think the burial should not take place until this dispute has been resolved? Your thoughts, we'd love to hear them.
But first, here is your news update with Jalani Tulo Ngwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective. Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go. Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go. SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The Zambian government has filed a lawsuit against the family of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu, seeking to stop his burial in South Africa today. The government argues that no burial should take place until disputes surrounding the former leader's final resting place are resolved. Bonolo Maribe has more.
Several of Edgar Lungu's family members, alongside the funeral service company holding his remains, are named in the lawsuit filed by Zambia's Attorney General, Kabesha. Kabesha says that the former president should be buried in Zambia with full military honors, in line with Zambian law and traditions. He argues that state funerals are national events governed by strict protocols, and that the public must take priority over personal wishes.
Hundreds of people in Kenya are expected to take to the streets across the country today to mark the 1 year since the start of the anti-tax demonstrations that left at least 60 people dead. The BBC's Akisha Wandera reports from Nairobi.
The 25th of June 2024 remains one of the most turbulent days in Kenya's recent political history. According to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, at least 60 people were killed in weeks of unrest. Many families say they are still waiting for justice and accountability, and the anger on the streets has only deepened. Kenya's police chief has urged people to remain peaceful and avoid restricted areas. Meanwhile, civil society groups and foreign embassies have called on the Kenyan government to respect the right to peaceful assembly and to carry out credible investigations into alleged abuses by security forces.
A UN-mandated commission investigating suspected human rights violations and war crimes in the Democratic Republic of Congo cannot proceed due to a funding crisis in the UN Human Rights Office. The OHCHR is facing a major cash crunch caused by some countries failing to fully pay their contributions. This has also been compounded by major cuts in foreign aid by the United States under President Donald Trump. In February, a special session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva agreed to set up a fact-finding mission and a formal commission of inquiry to investigate rights violations, including massacres and sexual violence in North and South Kivu in the east of the DRC. Advocacy group Equal Education has welcomed the launch of the Safe Schools Protocol by the South African Police Service and the Basic Education Department. The program aims to address violence and crime in schools. During the launch, Police Minister Senzo Mchunu said schools in KwaZulu-Natal, the Eastern Cape, Gauteng and the Western Cape provinces recorded high rates of learner-on-learner violence, highlighting the need for improved safety and security at schools. Community leader at Equal Education, Makanatsa Ziambi.
It's very important to consider the safety of learners in schools, because a lot of times people tend to think that schooling is just about the theory that learners get, but how safe learners are within the schools is very important, because there's a very big psychological link between how they are efficient at school and how safe they are. So I think it's very important, especially in the township areas, because that's where a lot of violent incidents occur when it comes to schools.
A court in Japan has sentenced a U.S. Marine stationed at the American base in Okinawa to 7 years in prison for sexual assault. The southernmost island hosts the bulk of U.S. military installations in Japan. 22-year-old Jamal Clayton had pleaded not guilty. The BBC's Shaima Khalil has the details.
In handing down the ruling, the Naha District Court judge said the victim's testimonies had a high level of credibility throughout. According to the ruling, the U.S. serviceman choked the woman from behind and attempted to sexually assault her. She sustained injuries in both eyes, which required around 2 weeks of treatment. For years, crimes committed by U.S. service members and non-military personnel in Okinawa have sparked anger and grievances from locals. 3 U.S. servicemen were indicted over alleged sexual crimes on the island since last June.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective. Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
In our sports headline, top coaches react to the Club World Cup level as group stage wraps up. Zimbabwe's Olympic medalist Casey Coventry has officially assumed the office as the IOC president. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. Wake up, Africa. Beda Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa. Wake up, Africa. Beda Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
It's Wednesday, and at this time every week we do what we call Profile on Wednesday, the slot where we spotlight Africans who are redefining what's possible across the continent. And this morning our guest is Anne Gituku Shongwe, who's the Director of UNAIDS Regional Support Team for East and Southern Africa. And from her early days in Kenya through the decades with the UN and the award-winning social enterprise Afro's Games, she's fused technology, gender advocacy and public health strategy to tackle some of Africa's toughest challenges. Her region remains the global epicenter of HIV. Adolescent girls and young women still account for more than a quarter of new infections and are 3 times more likely to contract the virus than their male peers. Yet Anne argues that investing in women's health and agency unlocks economic growth for everyone. With tightening donor budgets and a 2030 deadline to end AIDS as a public health threat, her work could not be more urgent. And we're delighted to have Anne with us this morning. Always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed. How are you?
Very well, Peter. Thank you so much for this. And thank you for showcasing this old man that you showed at the Comrades Marathon. I've been following that story, and it's really impressive, Peter. So keep pushing.
No, it is a wonderful story, and I think it's inspiring that really age isn't a thing. But anyway, let's go to you, because your story is also quite inspiring. And let's start with you taking us back to Nairobi. What experiences, or maybe even role models, first ignited your passion for social justice and gender equality?
Well, thank you so much, Peter, for taking me back that far. You know, I actually wasn't born in Nairobi. I was born outside of Nairobi in the Central Province, where my parents were born and grew up in the Mount Kenya area. And I was born just after independence. And so what I recall of my childhood was a lot of the energy around, a famous song about Kenyatta putting up the flag. In Kikuyu, we would sing this song, Kenyatta put up the flag. And I remember this as a little child, the sheer energy that came with freedom and independence, and the fact that Africans now had the opportunity to take over the reins of governance and leadership for our countries. Now, my mother was born in a political family. My grandfather was in the Mau Mau rebellion in the Mount Kenya area. He was very active there and continued into politics after, he was in the first cabinet of Kenya. And so we were always surrounded by politics and political work. And my mother and her siblings were very, very active. And we would run along and we understood that the stakes were very high and that it was important. And at any given time when we visited my grandfather's home, there were thousands and thousands of people. And I would always ask, what do they want? And it was always seeking some kind of support for services in one way or the other. And he was always solving problems. And I remember thinking, this must be an amazing position to be in, where you could actually do this. And my aspiration, in fact, believe it or not, was to be a politician at some point in my life. I'll come back to that story. And then fast forward, I went to high school again in Kenya, where I had this teacher who was teaching us theater, and I used to act. And in this, learned a lot about our anti-colonial pushed then, our real fight for justice. And I remember thinking, this can't be fair. And I then understood the role that women had played in our fight for social justice, in our fight for independence in Kenya, and how in their quiet way, very often in the background, not necessarily in the foreground at the time, were actually instrumental in ensuring that messages, free passage from across the country to one end of the country to the other for the Mau Mau, for example, was really initiated by women. And that for me was a huge inspiration. And then we had an attempted coup in Kenya, and I ended up at the University of Swaziland, and I spent a year and a half there and met a large part of the anti-apartheid movement. And that's kind of how I suppose I bedded my life in this region. I ended up getting married to someone from the region, but it really, I got to understand what real fight for freedom looked like. And I saw what women did in particular. And I saw how women used both frontline power, but also soft power to really make a difference in life. And my life was changed from then on. There was just no way to look back and sort of pretend that this didn't happen. It was real. And I recognized that I was positioned to make a difference wherever I was. And so whether it was in university or afterwards, I made sure that we were fighting for social justice and using my voice in every way that I could. In my positioning in every way that I've been able to. And so it's a natural progress into the work that I have then done at the UN and in my own social enterprise.
So is that what convinced you to leave a comfortable consulting post in the US to join the UNDP in Africa? I mean, what convinced you that that was the right route to take?
Well, I think the first thing was that I recognized very early that I'm a macro impact kind of person. So I was very, very keen to see how we could change systems. And so when I was doing this management consulting work, and by the way, in the management consulting work, what was I doing? I was focusing on training of Africans. So I was in the US, I worked for the National Council of Negro Women first, and I was working with women in different African countries and funding their work in agriculture in particular in African countries, Nigeria, Malawi, different countries, Niger. And then I moved into this management consulting company where we gave scholarships to a lot of South Africans. So many South Africans who are in leadership positions from Eswatini, from Malawi, from Botswana. We gave scholarships Namibia to the US. And I was very, very involved in the engagement there. So even then, it wasn't just consulting, to sell Coca-Cola or to sell, it was really about social justice, really. And it was about preparing the future generation of leaders for South Africa, for Botswana, for Eswatini. And so UNDP for me became an opportunity to look at how I could go into a country and support that country's macro efforts to build its economy in a way that was available for every single citizen. And I did that. And so I started there. I worked in Eswatini in that role, and it really was able to support it. In fact, at the time, the women in 1995 and ensuring that the agendas of violence and social justice for women, women's access to economic power were on the agenda. So no matter where I was and the opportunity, at least
Anne, we're having issues with the network for some reason, and you're freezing and we're not hearing you. So I'm going to put you back to our producers, and let's hope we can try and reconnect with you on a better line. We're talking to Anne Shongwe, who's a real champion, activist, social justice defender, and has been working a long time in the space of HIV and AIDS, and particularly concerned about our young women that are very, very vulnerable in this area. There have been a lot of gains in the region that she's looking after, East and Southern Africa, and the interventions. And I want to start talking a little bit more about that work, actually, before we lose the signal. Anne is back with us. Let's talk a little bit about Eastern Southern Africa, which has managed to halve AIDS-related deaths since 2010. Yet what we're seeing is that young women still bear the brunt of new infections. What do you think are the structural drivers that are keeping this gender gap so wide in terms of young women being so vulnerable?
Thank you for keeping on to shine that light on this issue, Peter. That's the data that we have had up until these massive cuts that we saw earlier this year. It's the same structural issues that we find across the board in terms of women's power. From economic power, many, many young women are engaged in economic transactional sex. It was the old sugar daddy story before. It's still that. Many young women are victims of gender-based violence. Where, especially in different African countries, access to education is an issue. In some of our countries, only 40%, 50% of girls are in schools. And so where access is limited, the vulnerability is even higher increased. We've just released a study just in the last week that is basically showing, we're calling it the cost of inaction. And it's showing that actually the cost of not realizing the sexual and reproductive rights of young people, especially young women, like early pregnancy, costs South Africa about $10.3 billion in lost lifetime earnings, increased healthcare costs. It costs Zimbabwe 2.9 billion, right? So we've been looking at, just by not acting on this, what does this mean? It costs South Africa alone an estimated $12.4 billion in terms of data of GBV, the cost of GBV. And so what we know is that until we deal with the social norms that continue to drive the inequalities that have girls and young women so vulnerable, we will then see the level of HIV infections that we are seeing. And so an investment in young women and girls is an investment in a program that education plus.
All right, and the line keeps breaking so badly, and what we're talking about so important.
Girls in school, because we're.
Oh dear. All right. I'm gonna put you back to my producers again, and let's try again. Third time lucky, perhaps. All right. So we continue to explore some of the challenges that Anne is facing with her team, and I'm curious now. I mean, so much progress had been being made, but in January the US paused its foreign aid disbursements, and more recent cuts threatened things like PEPFAR support. And I just wonder how that disruption has played out on the ground already, if it has, and what contingency plans maybe could help stabilize drug supply chains. It is a huge one, and I think Donald Trump, as much as he's gung-ho and he talks about America first, there are real people's lives at stake, and so let's find out a little bit more about that. And third time lucky, let's see if we can hold the signal now. You mentioned this foreign aid disbursement disruption, Donald Trump, etc. Has that played out on the ground already? We were making such good progress. Has that been disrupted? Is there early evidence of that?
That very much so, very much so. The disruption is completely unprecedented. We did not expect this at all. I think the most painful part about this is that many of our countries in Africa were highly dependent on the US government's funding through PEPFAR and the USAID. We had countries like Tanzania, 90% of their HIV responses coming from the US government. Zambia, Malawi, 60-70% were coming from the US government. So the direct impact is that in countries where their drugs were coming from the US government, most countries had supply for 6 months to 8 months, at least for treatment. But the prevention side, which is the side where girls and young women in particular were getting their supplies of whether it was PrEP or the kind of economic opportunities to prevent the vulnerability. Those programs were impacted immediately. PEPFAR had a program called Dreams, where 2 million girls were on their programs. Those were dropped with immediate effect. And so we, in our estimates, are showing already from the data that where we were having about 3,500 new infections every day, these are estimated to rise already to 5,800. We are estimating an additional 6.6 million new infections by 2029, 4.2 million deaths. So in each of our countries, we are doing that data. It's early days to be able to give a comprehensive view, but what we know is that country by country, people who would ordinarily have showed up in clinics, particularly drop-in centers where there was concerns about human rights, or young girls who are concerned about the kind of stigma and discrimination that they experience, that they are not going into clinics because they don't feel that there is the kind of support that they have. And in some instances, they don't have the tools to support their prevention work. So we are very concerned about that, and we are seeing the impact very much. But I have to say, governments have stepped up significantly. And it's a rude awakening, but there has been a stepping up. Tanzania just announced a new levy for healthcare that includes a huge part for HIV. And that's important because domestic resources, domestic spending on HIV and on health is what will turn the corner for us and sustain our responses in the long term. And so we are seeing that. But we continue to look for resources to be able to fill in these gaps because the gaps are significant.
So much to cover in such a short space of time, but I am curious, particularly in the age that we're living in, a digital space and innovation. You have mobile games that tackle themes from gender-based violence to entrepreneurship. Right. Tell us a little about this digital disruption and Afros.
Oh, that was one of the most amazing parts of my career, I have to say, because we were able to reach hundreds and thousands of young people with important messages, which was my intention. I was frustrated that we were not getting to young people with the kind of messaging that was important. And so in partnership with multiple telecom companies, we were able to reach young people with messages on civic education, from HIV to prevention of GBV, my game Muraba, that we were able to reach hundreds and thousands of young people, teaching young boys about how what the age of consent means. So many boys, Peter, don't understand that having sex with an underage girl is statutory rape. They didn't understand that. And so providing information in a way that they can consume and start making better decisions and start shifting their own beliefs and social norms is so important. And that's what we were doing with Afros. This is work that we continued to do. When I was at UN Women, we were working on that. At UNAIDS, we have continued to work in partnership with other partners. We've got right now in Ethiopia, a chatbot that is helping young people to understand their risk factors for HIV. So AI is useful for us now, and we're beginning to explore how to actually do this much faster and help us to deal with the gaps that have been created by the loss of funding, where young people were physically taking people and informing people about to access health services. We can now also use chatbots to be able to do that, or be able to use AI and different tools, mobile games, gamify experiences where you're getting rewards from practicing better, having better behavior. And so that is an area that we are investing in and really trying to expand in real ways. And my experience from Afros is very, very helpful there, even though I must say I have now aged quite a bit, Peter. So the young people in my team are the ones who are driving this work. And I keep saying to them, go out and test, check what young people really want, because you learn real hard truths directly from those who are the users. And the young people are the best to teach us this.
2030, an important deadline. UNAIDS insisting that the end of AIDS as a public health threat is still achievable by 2030. COVID was a disruptor, and now this funding has disrupted the cause further. Is 2030 still achievable, do you think?
It is achievable, but it means that we have to step forward in much bolder ways, because what we have as a massive opportunity now is that we have the tools, we have new drugs, new medicines that are long-acting, that if invested in effectively and implemented, we can turn the tide and reach that 2030 goal. So lenacapavir is a new injectable drug that for now just needs to be injected twice a year and would prevent HIV. So you imagine for these girls who are getting infected every single week, 3,000 of them, that could be prevented. The challenge we have is the cost of the drug. It's out of reach. At this point, it's 25,000, 40,000 per year per user. But yet we've got research that shows that it can be provided for even as low as $40 per year. That's affordable, that's reachable. And so we as Africans and we at UNAIDS and partners have a big campaign that we are pushing and really pushing for lenacapavir to be manufactured locally in ways that are much, much, much more affordable so that everybody can access it. Until then, and unless we embrace these new technologies, it will be very difficult for us to move at the pace that we've been moving and with the disruptions that we've been seeing for us to be able to achieve those objectives. And so it is possible, but it does require that we take very, very bold steps in new ways, and that all the partners who are with us, all the governments that are engaged, are really engaging in new ways, are investing in ensuring that we can end AIDS by 2030. We've made such huge progress. This is one area that we can say as Africans that we have led the way, and we can close the gap entirely if we do invest in the right direction and we target those who are most vulnerable, girls and young women. The key populations who are very vulnerable, whether it's gay men or sex workers or injecting drug users, these are most vulnerable to HIV. If they can access these tools, we can turn the tide for sure.
And I'm always so inspired when I've spoken to you. Thank you for giving us your time. We're going to have to get you on more regularly because there's so much to talk about and so much to keep in the news cycle so that people can get interested and take action. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And please don't get tired. Keep going like that 83-year-old man.
Thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's Anne Gituku-Shonga, Director, UNAIDS Regional Support Team for Eastern and Southern Africa, talking to us about this very, very important work that she's doing. And I'm particularly interested in our young girls who are most vulnerable to HIV and AIDS. And we as a society really need to play our part in changing attitudes and making it unacceptable for young girls to be exposed in the way that they are. It's time for your news headlines. Here is Jwalani Tulo Mwebe.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628. SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines. South Africa will today host the third G20 Sherpas meeting in Sun City in the Northwest Province. It is expected to bring to the fore a myriad of challenges facing the globe. Hundreds of people in Kenya are expected to take to the streets across the country today to mark the one-year anniversary since the start of the anti-tax demonstrations that left at least 60 people dead. And finally, a new study suggests that progress in vaccinating children against the number of life-threatening diseases has stalled or even gone backwards in the last 2 decades. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Let's find out now what's happening in the world of sports. Here's Vigile Lingwati with our full and final update on Rise and Shine for this Wednesday.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628. Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And we kick off with rugby news. The Springbok coach Rashi Rasmus has included 4 uncapped players in his squad to face the Barbarians in an unofficial match in Cape Town on Saturday. Flanker Vincent Chituka and tight head prop Asanda Ntlabanganye will start, while hooker Manas van der Merwe and another tight head Nietling Fouché are the uncapped replacements on the bench. In an exhibit match with no test status, the Springboks begin their international season against the Barbers. Lock forward Rodi Yaga gets a run in the green and gold for the first time since 2023. Siya Kolisi will captain the side that includes 9 World Cup winners in the starting 15. Erasmus says he needs sober and experienced heads amongst his squad just in case the game gets out of hand, which can happen in the Barbarian-style match.
I had the feeling that it's a privilege to be here. For the people say, why it's so annoying, why you should be here. But once we're here, it's a privilege because in 4 years' time, it's not going to happen again. And to be in 4 years' time to happen again, you have to win big prizes. I don't know it's going to happen. And once we're here, I love when I see Botafogo, Fluminense, all the teams, Brazilian teams, Argentinian teams, how celebrate the goals, how they are together. I invite them. I love them. I like them. And this is all about. You have to leave that competition.
And Mamelodi Sundowns are gearing up for a high-stakes clash against the Brazilians giants Fluminense in their FIFA Club World Cup Group F encounter with a potent attacking Arsenal. That could prove decisive. The showdown set for Wednesday is not just a continental clash, but all eyes are looking at the tantalizing duel between Fluminense's legendary defender Thiago Silva and Sundowns midfielder Dynamo Lucas Ribeiro. While Silva brings a wealth of experience from elite clubs like Chelsea and PSG, he'll be up against a younger compatriot who's bursting with creativity and composure. With the stage set and pressure mounting, fans across the country are eager to see whether the dynamic Sundowns outfit can outlast their South American opponents and book their spot in the next phase of the competition. History-making and Zimbabwe's most decorated Olympian Kirsty Coventry has officially taken the helm of the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, becoming the first woman ever to lead the global sporting body. Coventry assumed office, replacing outgoing President Thomas Bach of Germany, who stepped down after serving for 12 years. Her appointment marks a new era, now just for the IOC, but for the African representation in the international sports leadership. She was elected during the IOC's 144th session held in Greece in March, emerging victorious from a competitive field of 7 high-profile candidates. The list includes British athletics icon Sebastian Coe, Spain's Juan Antonio Samaranch Jr., Japan's Morinari Watanabe, France's David Lampatiet, Johan Eliash of Great Britain, and Prince Faisal bin Hussein of Jordan. A 2-time Olympic gold medalist in the 200-meter backstroke medals to her name, 2 golds, 3 silvers, and a bronze alongside 3 world championship titles. And we end with golf news. James Piot will be teeing off in this week's PGA Tour Rocket Classic in Detroit on a sponsor's exemption, the first in a PGA event for an ex-LIV golf player. The 26-year-old American, a Michigan native, is one of the new players to play events on the PGA Tour and the Saudi-backed Upstart Series, whose players are banned from PGA events. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
And it's time now for our final business news update on Rise and Shine. And at the business desk, Nosipo Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news this hour, Nigeria and Brazil have signed a $1 billion agreement to boost agriculture, food security, energy and defense in the West African nation. Nigeria's Vice President Kassim Shettima says both countries aim to deploy over $1 billion to deliver mechanized farming equipment, training and service centers across Nigeria. Tabisoli Hoko reports.
Much farming in Nigeria is subsistence and land is owned by families or individuals, which makes large-scale acquisition problematic. Nigeria also imports food for its 200 million plus population. Nigeria's Vice President Kassim Shettima says the Nigerian government is from subsistence to scale in agriculture and in energy, and the government is taking long overdue steps to attract serious investment into gas production, refining and renewables. Nigeria has also asked the banks to recapitalize to attract foreign investments.
The Public Service Commission of South Africa says government owes over $901 million in leave payouts to nearly 190,000 employees. These are employees who were employed in the public service sector before July 2000. Commissioner Anele Kloiya says the total capped leave liability represents approximately 14% of the total public service workforce, most of whom are older workers in the education and health sectors.
When we say it's a contingent liability, we don't mean that there's money that has been spent. But what we ordinarily mean is that for every employee who was employed before the 1st of July 2000, who has saved on that leave, it means the state owes the money.
The Red Meat Producers Organization of South Africa, the RPO, says the foot and mouth outbreak is more of an economic crisis than an animal health crisis. It says that while the state-led vaccination program has kicked off, much more needs to be done to provide market access to affected farmers through food and mouth certified abattoirs. Freaky Murray of the RPO.
We need to sell our animals to feedlots. This is the time of the year where we usually generate our income, and now everything holds to a standstill. The big issue is basically an economic crisis and not so much animal disease or animal health crisis. So let's say, for example, you're in the Northwest, even if you have received your vaccines and the animals was vaccinated and you can start to slaughter them, if there's no abattoir for F&D slaughters close to you, you can basically not market your animals.
Issues such as the U.S. tariffs on African exports and the imposition of visa and travel restrictions on some African countries have come under the spotlight at the U.S.-Africa Business Summit in the Angolan capital, Luanda. The meeting, which concludes today, has gathered a significant number of high-level attendees, including African presidents, heads of government, ministers, senior U.S. government officials, and leaders from U.S. and African companies. They are hoping to foster economic cooperation and investment between the United States and Africa. Phil Nello is an independent commentator.
We had the Secretary General of the African Union who actually raised this issue, this concern about the United States wanted to do business with the African countries, the same time that they are imposing new restrictions on visa for some African countries. And the answer came immediately from Mr. Troy Fitzgerald, who is the head of the Africa Affairs at the State Department, who assured Africans that there has been no further restriction on African countries in order to do business with Africa or Africans traveling to the United States.
And finally, oil prices have tumbled 5% after Israel agreed to a ceasefire with Iran after nearly 2 weeks of conflict. Brent crude, the international benchmark for oil prices, fell below $67 a barrel by the end of the day, though it then recovered some ground in later trading. Prices had spiked in recent days as concerns grew that Iran could disrupt global supplies by blockading the Strait of Hormuz, a key shipping route for oil and gas. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 549. In Botswana is 13 bula 36. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 50, and in Zambia it's 23 kwacha 20. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rupee 51. Russia is 78 rubles 25. India is 86 rupees 62. China at 7 yuan 18, and in South Africa, $1 is trading at 18 rand cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,330 and platinum at $1,314 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $68.04 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628. Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix. Kwa nini wanamuziki wengi sana wa kizazi kipya hawafiki mbali pale wanapofanya muziki?
Ni kwa sababu kitu cha kwanza ambacho naweza nikaongelea nikagusia zaidi sana ni kusema kuwa wale wasanii wanapotoa ngoma yao ya kwanza ikiwa kama kahiti kidogo tu, wanaanza kutamba mitaani, wanaonekana kama wapo majuu zaidi sana.
Kuna wanamuziki wengine ambao wanakimbilia kwa waganga wa jadi. Hivi muziki na dawa vinaendana?
Kitu cha kwanza naweza nikasema ni kuwa muziki na dawa haviendani. Lakini muziki ni kipaji.
Kuna watu wengine wanashutumu wasanii wengine kwamba wanaroga.
Wanaroga, wale wasanii kama wanaroga ni kutokujiamini tu. Lakini kitu cha muhimu sana ni kipaji.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628. Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Kwa nini wanamuziki wengi sana wa kizazi kipya hawafiki mbali pale wanapofanya muziki?
Ni kwa sababu kitu cha kwanza ambacho naweza nikaongelea nikagusia zaidi sana ni kusema kuwa wale wasanii wanapotoa ngoma yao ya kwanza ikiwa kama kahiti kidogo tu, wanaanza kutamba mitaani, wanaonekana kama wapo majuu zaidi sana.
Kuna wanamuziki wengine ambao wanakimbilia kwa waganga wa jadi. Hivi muziki na dawa vinaendana?
Kitu cha kwanza naweza nikasema ni kuwa muziki na dawa haviendani. Lakini muziki ni kipaji.
Kuna watu wengine wanashutumu wasanii wengine kwamba wanaroga.
Wanaroga, wale wasanii kama wanaroga ni kutokujiamini tu. Lakini kitu cha muhimu sana ni kipaji.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Let's move over to Zambia now, where the government there has filed a lawsuit against the family of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu, seeking to stop his burial in South Africa today. The government argues that no burial should take place until disputes surrounding the former leader's final resting place are resolved. We're now joined by Sophie Mukwena, SABC foreign editor, to unpack this story. Sophie, good morning to you, and how are you this Wednesday?
I'm fine.
The court case that's been filed has been dubbed as a public service announcement or public service court order. How much of this is actually in the public interest?
Well, it is in the public interest, but depending what's the view. We know that there are those who feel that the wish of Lungu must be respected, in a sense that the family is saying, and those who are close to him are saying. He said he doesn't want the current president, Hakainde Hichilema, to preside over his funeral, and therefore there are those who will support the family. And then you have those who are saying he's a former head of state, he must be honored and be accorded the privileges of a former head of state when they've passed on. And therefore there are different views. And now the issue here is that the Zambian Attorney General is using a test case in relation to what transpired during the passing on of Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, where the family wanted to honor his wish of being buried at his farm, where his wife is buried. But the then government under Edgar Lungu took the Kaunda family to court to argue that in the public interest he's a former head of state, the same argument that's being advanced now. And therefore the courts in Zambia ruled in favor of Edgar Lungu's government. And we saw KK being buried at the assembly garden that is almost like your hero's acre, against the wish of the family and of course of the deceased. Now that's the same argument they are using in South Africa, but the South African courts will also rely on the South African laws because of the jurisdiction. It's South African laws, and the South African laws are saying when someone has passed on, you hand over the body to the next of kin. And that's why sometimes you even have to do the DNA test to ensure that you are giving this body to the right people. And that's what has happened. That's why the Home Affairs has issued the burial rights. That's why the Home Affairs in South Africa has issued a death certificate. And therefore, it will be interesting to see what is the South African court going to say, whether it will take into consideration that this is just a temporary measure intervention while dispute mechanism resolving this standoff is continuing. So we don't know what's going to happen.
And it seems this dispute mechanism is based on a political and logistical and practical side of things, but on a principal part of things. Why is this still being seen as a dispute that needs to be resolved? If the family had made the decision and announced that he will be buried in South Africa as their wishes instead of his home country of Zambia, the former president of Edgar Lungu.
As I pointed out, it's based on those arguments that they are putting forward of what the laws in Zambia are saying when a head of state or a former head of state has passed on. But yeah, that's their argument. Yes, of course, there are lots of conspiracies in terms of why Hichilema is adamant that he be buried, including some, beliefs and I don't know how to describe it, the African beliefs and norms and all of that. Those are just gossips, which is very difficult to can substantiate in court or prove the allegations of they want this body because they fear that they lose elections if they don't do certain rituals. It's just a very difficult story, and I think the courts today will give a direction in terms of what must happen.
The former president, the current president rather, when speaking of the former president, current president Hichilema, after this entire dispute, deciding to halt or stop the period of mourning, had said that the doors remain open as far as his office is concerned to the Lungu family. Was that a thing that stayed? Was the door open for the family, the Lungu family, in terms of them being given the respect and the opportunity to discuss whatever needed to be discussed? Do we know?
The door was opened, it's still opened, but clearly they have taken a decision, and at the end of the day, they are members of the family. And as I pointed out, from where I'm sitting as a South African, that's what happens. Even in terms of the South African protocols that government put up in terms of the death of former heads of state and the head of state, if that happens when someone dies in office or you are a former South African head of state, there are protocols, but they still consult with the family. And if the family decides that, I don't want a state funeral, those wishes will be granted by the South African government. Let's take, for example, Nelson Mandela. We know here at West Park Cemetery, there's a dedicated portion for outstanding and eminent persons, almost like your hero's acre. But Deba, because he had informed everybody, family, media, we knew, government knew that he wants to be laid to rest in Kunu. That's what happened. He didn't even go at Nkegezweni, where he was born, where we have Mandla Mandela as a chief there. No, he didn't go even there. He said, I want to go to Kunu because that's where I spent most of my time after his family was expelled or was hounded in that village where he was born because of the chief who didn't agree with that family. And then the family of Mandela moving to Kunu, and he grew up in Kunu. He was not born in Kunu. And that's why even to his body is there in Kunu, South Africa.
Coming back to this court bid, Sophie, the morgue or the company that runs the morgue where the remains of Edgar Lungu are being stored is also being sued under this court bid. Do we know why?
It's being sued because the morgue then has to conduct the funeral. So if you want to stop the funeral, you stop all those who are involved in this process. And the morgue is involved in the burial process.
From which angle, then, should South Africa be entering this chat with these recent developments? The country had earlier offered its support to the Lungu family, but had added that this would be a matter to be resolved between Zambia and the Lungu family. You touched on the part of legalities, but on every other part, from where should South Africa enter the chat?
nowhere, South Africa can't do anything. The government cannot do anything. It's a matter between the Lungu family and the government of Zambia. South Africa can only do what they are expected to do in line with the South African Constitution and the laws, as I indicated earlier on what the South African laws are saying. Give the body to the next of kin or the family member. And that's it. In fact, this thing, it's really a private matter. He was here in his private capacity. He was here and he came for medical treatment at a private institution. It was a private thing. It is still a private matter. That is why South Africa is saying, yes, we understand that it would be a good thing to have him buried in his home country and being honored the way he is supposed to be honored. But at the end of the day, South Africa can't dictate to the family nor to the Zambian authority what to do. And that's why when you look at the papers, the South African government is not included. And it's not involved even in the funeral process. It's not a state funeral in South Africa. It's a private funeral in South Africa. I don't even expect the South African president to be there. He is in Cape Town. It is going to be just Zambians and the family of Lungu.
How might this burial dispute, in hindsight, affect the image of Zambia's current leader, Hakainde Hichilema, and his political career?
I'm not so sure. I don't know. The elections are only next year. It's still a long way before the elections. And we don't know how this matter will be finally resolved. Maybe later there might be, agreement on certain things. We can't predict. We really can't predict.
Thank you for your time, Sophie.
Thank you.
SABC, or the South African Broadcasting Corporation's foreign editor, Sophie Mukwena, there, giving us analysis and some highlights, I guess, in terms of the latest developments as far as the burial of former Zambian President Edgar Lungu. That's how we come to the end of today's programming, this 25th of June, Wednesday's edition of Africa Rise and Shine. It's goodbye from me, Asanda Beda.
And for me, Peter Ndoro, everyone in Mozambique, happy Independence Day. 50 years of independence. Let us hope that the next 50 brings you everything that you desire and wish. But have a fabulous day. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Right now, though, it's time for your news with Jwalani Tulongwepe. Bye, everyone.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Kwa nini wanamuziki wengi sana wa kizazi kipya hawafiki mbali pale wanapofanya muziki?
Ni kwa sababu kitu cha kwanza ambacho naweza nikaongelea nikagusia zaidi sana ni kusema kuwa wale wasanii wanapotoa ngoma yao ya kwanza ikiwa kama kahiti kidogo tu, wanaanza kutamba mitaani, wanaonekana kama wapo majuu zaidi sana.
Kuna wanamuziki wengine ambao wanakimbilia kwa waganga wa jadi. Hivi muziki na dawa vinaendana?
Kitu cha kwanza naweza nikasema ni kuwa muziki na dawa haviendani. Lakini muziki ni kipaji.
Kuna watu wengine wanashutumu wasanii wengine kwamba wanaroga.
Wanaroga, wale wasanii kama wanaroga ni kutokujiamini tu. Lakini kitu cha muhimu